Hey everybody, and welcome to the Growth Experience Podcast. I am your host, Chris Dye. Our hope is that by listening to this podcast, you realize that you have a gift. And by believing in your gift, you can uncover your purpose and have vision for your life. Whether you're listening in your car, at home, or watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in, and let's go! Hey everybody, welcome to the Growth Experience Podcast, episode 11, right? Yep, there he is on the wall again. We were just talking about him. Will, my guy. Welcome to episode 11 of the Growth Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Dye. Really excited for this one today. We talked about it as I started at the beginning of the year, having my buddy here, my buddy, my brother, one of my best friends. Super thankful for him and glad he's here. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Rocket Title Group. RTG is a full-service land, title, and escrow settlement provider here to protect your real estate investments. When you work with their knowledgeable team, you will be guided through the process in a transparent and timely way. I absolutely love Rocket Title. We rededicated and rekindled our relationship at the beginning of the year and really towards the end of last year. Because just how above and beyond they go for our clients. And so if you're looking for a reputable title company that will literally bend over backwards to make things happen for you, Rocket Title Group is the way to go. Shout out to all of you guys that love you and appreciate you. So we'll jump right in it. Today, my guest, Michael Tignor, a.k.a. Tig, a.k.a. Tigathy, a.k.a. Tig's Tunes, however you want to dice it up. Dude, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, dude, it's good to be here.
I'm sure you're glad to be back. I know that you guys may be able to see it, may not. He's sporting the Florida State Noles hoodie there. I've got the Gator gear repping here. So we'll talk a little bit about that and kind of your journey to just be a part of the second worst team in America behind University of Kentucky. Sorry to all my UK listeners, but we'll get there. Also want to say, super thankful for all the traction that we're getting for all of our listeners. Almost over 600 downloads in less than 3 months between YouTube and all of our podcast platforms. So super thankful for all of you that are listening and consuming the content. Please like, share, subscribe on YouTube. We're kind of low in the subscribers, but that's okay. I'm not doing it for that. Honestly, I'm doing it just because I love it, enjoy it. Something fun that I get to do, I look forward to every single week. And then also, every single person that sits across from me, this podcast is about them, right? It's about you. So at the end of the day, they're going to say valuable things. You're going to say something valuable today, and I want people to share it so that other people can listen to it and, eventually come out, tell maybe their story of things that they're doing and have that confidence. So anyways, right down into it. Michael, I'm going to call him Tig. Tig, thanks for being here, brother. Can you give us some background information on you, where you're from, how you got to Louisville, all that stuff?
Yeah, sure. I will say you should do some 5-star review giveaways. I've heard that on some podcasts.
It's a good idea.
Anybody that gives you a 5-star, put them in a pool and read that review.
That's true, because all of you faithful listeners, and we do have several faithful listeners, we also don't have a single review. So please go on podcast or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Audible, wherever you consume YouTube, and please rate and subscribe. So I need to do a giveaway.
Yeah, I would.
Okay, all right.
I'll make sure that I review this after I get home.
I appreciate that. Thank you. You're the first interviewee.
Yeah.
To rate.
And depending on how this goes, will depend on the stars you get. So.
Well, I guess I better behave. Okay, so we talked about this too. Tig is the first person who sat across from me that really knows a lot of embarrassing things about me. We did not prepare for this, so I'm begging and pleading for him to just kind of, keep some things.
I'm going to be on my best behavior.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Kelsey knows the stories, but Tig lived the stories. So
yes, I did.
and they were good times while they lasted, but too old for that stuff now. So.
I don't know that you're ever too old for it, Chris.
Too old.
But anyway, about me, I am originally from Richmond, Virginia. I grew up there my whole life. When it came time to choose college, I knew that music was really important to me, and I visited a bunch of places, and for some reason, when I got to the University of Louisville, it just felt like home. And this was pre all of the nice renovations they did to really kind of beautify the campus, but there was just something about this place. And so I auditioned and committed to Louisville. I was here for 4.5 years, did a music ed degree. Along with that, I was in the marching band and pep band as much as I could be. I was a part of the band that won the 2013 championship, and then we also were at the women's championship game the same year, 2013. Happened, hang the banner. After I graduated,
hang the banner. The banner exists.
Hashtag hang the banner.
Right.
Josh Hurd, if you're listening, I appreciate the banner that you hung. But anyway, so after I graduated, it was a little bit tough finding a teaching job in the middle of, the school year. So I subbed in Bullitt County for a while. I also was an Uber driver. I worked at a local grocery store, just trying to make ends meet. The 2015 school year, I landed my first job in JCPS as an elementary music teacher. I spent 2 years in JCPS as at 2 different schools as an elementary teacher. And then about halfway through that second year, I was told by my principal that funding was likely to be cut and my job was going to be kind of on the chopping block. And so kind of on a whim, I looked at a higher ed jobs website. I found a job in Livingston, Alabama as a assistant band director at a small D2 school down there.
Yeah.
I applied, finally got an interview, and I spent, prior to this year, I spent the last 5 years as the assistant and the interim director of bands at the University of West Alabama.
Yeah.
That was something I could have never imagined, being a college band director at 25.
Yeah.
Lots of lessons to be learned there, but while I was there, I got my master's at South Florida in music ed. And then a year ago, I was auditioning and interviewing for PhD positions, and I landed at Florida State University in there as a PhD in music ed candidate, and I'm about 6 weeks from finishing year one.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. All right. So lots I want. I had really – I started out doing no outlines, right? And then I did outlines for a little while. And then when I did the outlines, I realized that we didn't follow the outline. So I stopped doing outlines again. So I'm just trying to really listen and dive into the interviewee and what they're talking about. So we're going to do just that. So we're going to rewind, right?
Sure.
So you're growing up in Virginia. I met your family. They're awesome. Your brother, Jack, Morgan, your sister, your mom and dad. Your mom is super nice. I apologize. I don't remember their names.
It's all Mama Tig and Dad.
And Dad, got it. So Mama Tig and Dad, they raised you the right way. I could tell as soon as we connected and met that we were going to be friends. And so, can you talk about just, you say at 25 years old you never saw yourself at that point in your life being a college band director. So I want to start at the beginning of like your upbringing, how they spoke into your life. The things that stood out to you as you grew up, the things you took interest in, right? And one of the things I talk about on the show is that, there's connection and vulnerability. So we kind of dive into some of the early stuff too, just to see what that was like for you. So
before we rewind all the way back, I do want to say, I want to mention how me and Chris met originally.
Oh no!
This is not a bad story about you, but
it's the glasses.
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I get to band camp my freshman year at Louisville, and Chris and his friends John and Chad, the three of them all had mohawks. I'm fairly certain.
Yeah, that's fair.
And they were all sophomores, and so I was the freshman, and I could tell that they were buddies, and I looked at Chris for some reason specifically, and I was like, I'm going to be friends with that guy.
Yeah. And
Chris ended up being my band dad. The upperclassmen get matched with a freshman.
Yeah.
And that year we ended up rushing and both joining Phi Mu Alpha, which was amazing. And, we've just been super tight ever since. But
Absolutely.
I just had to share that little tidbit about the Mohawk.
I'm glad it wasn't more explicit, and I appreciate that memory.
The Mohawk and the Oakley sunglasses.
The white ones.
Yeah, the white ones.
Oh, man, I miss those jokers. I gave them to – actually, I think Jimmy bought them from me.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if he still has them or not. Jimmy, I might want my sunglasses back, bro. But
I'm sure Jimmy doesn't have them anymore.
No, probably not. I think I'm 99% sure he told me they got broken, so I was a little sad.
Well, sunglasses are meant to be broken at some
Oakley's,
point.
bro. Not Oakley's.
But about my upbringing, my parents definitely instilled the values in me that were going to really translate into being a just overall like good person, a good human being.
Yeah.
And to be caring and compassionate towards people.
Right.
And I was raised in the Episcopal Church. I spent basically my entire childhood through the end of my high school career in the church choir. And so I spent 2 to 3 days a week at church. We had 2 days of practice, and then we sang every other Sunday, but I was there the off Sundays as well. And so, along with my parents' upbringing, I grew up in the church, and the faith and the relationship with God, was built there as well. And so, not only did I have the morals bestowed on me from my parents, but I had those Christian morals as well. And so, I think a lot of that kind of molded me into who I am.
Yeah. When did you first notice at that time? Maybe you're talking about the choir, and I know even you told us that a long time ago. Your kind of talent and ear specifically for music.
Yeah. So joining the choir, my mom. We joined our church in, I think I was in first grade, and it took my mom like 2 full years to convince me to join choir. They have these recruitment dinners like twice a year where you get to have pizza with everybody and sit in on a rehearsal, and I was so glad that she finally did, and so I remember going to that and saying, well, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Looking back, I've known that I've had almost like a gift of music since I was a very small kid. I remember going to church and sitting in the pews with my grandmother and being able to come home and sing the same songs in the same key.
Yeah.
Which is not something that your average 3-year-old can do.
Right.
And I realized that as I grew older and matured musically, that kind of fully transformed into, I realized that I could sing a note without it needing to be played on the piano, and kind of realized that, that's called perfect pitch. And to be fair, it's more or less a glorified party trick, but
we're going to make you do it on the show.
That's somewhere between a B and a C.
My man, there it is. A little sharp B.
But yeah, the choir was definitely my first taste of, and definitely the start of my musical beginnings.
Yeah.
I loved the training that I got as a musician. It wasn't just about singing the songs, but our choir director, really pushed on us the music theory kind of applications.
Sure.
Interval training, sight singing.
This is your choir director?
Yeah.
Not necessarily band directors?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
He was really big on interval training. We would go through and sing. He had we just had kind of a thing where we did the major and minor intervals going up the scale and back down. So you started as a probationary member, you moved to a novice, and then your top level was chorister. To become a novice, he would play, along with singing one of our pieces, he would play 2 notes, and he would ask you to identify the highest or the lowest note.
Okay.
To move to chorister, he'd play a triad, and you'd have to be able to pick that middle note.
Okay. So it wouldn't even necessarily be like a major chord. It would just be 3 notes.
Yeah, he would typically kind of stick with, major, minor, augmented, diminished. It was never, he wasn't playing 3 consecutive chromatic notes
Sure.
and you find the middle. But those theory aspects were really important, and that really got me started off on probably the best foot for moving ahead, joining band in 6th grade.
Absolutely.
Playing the trombone in middle school. And,
So you started on trombone then,
yeah.
and still playing trombone.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's awesome. This is why I love doing this, because I hadn't even heard that whole story. And if you're a musician and you're watching or listening to this, like, to get that classical training, that true training, and the knowledge of music theory, like, I had to take AP music theory in high school, right? Which I didn't even take until my senior year. So you started this in like, what, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade?
Yeah, 3rd grade.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. That's really cool. And I'm sure you can attest to, like, yes, you had a natural gift, which that's what this podcast is all about, but also within that natural gift, you had the training to hone that in and get better and grow, right?
Yeah, it was a really good. Having perfect pitch is great. It's I say it's a glorified party trick, and it is.
Yeah.
But it is a helpful tool in some aspects. But having those kind of the interval training where people with like relative pitch have, where they hear. They kind of know one note, and then they're able to base it off the interval. Having that interval training has been probably even more important than the perfect pitch itself. Yeah,
and I would say that's what kind of helped me out a lot. So this is a topic I have not talked about, and that's why I'm super excited to have Tig on the show. Is I started super early in music as well. Did Orff instruments and musicals in elementary school. Started playing in band in middle school, playing the trumpet. Proceeded to play trumpet my freshman year of high school, switched to euphonium. Euphonium was a super natural transition for me. Talked to Will about this the other day. Had a lot of talent as a euphonium player. Didn't quite have the work ethic there, but, is what it is. Not something I was supposed to do anyway. But music has been a large part of my life. I always say a former life, but, not too long ago.
Yeah.
And that's what you described as the relative pitch, pretty much everybody, if you're in music an extended period of time, whether you're a brass instrument you're tuning on an F concert or a woodwind instrument tuning on an A, you get that relative pitch pretty well. Like I went and helped our other fraternity brother Sam Rouser a couple times over the last couple weeks at Doss High School, and as I'm singing the scores to try and help the trumpet and euphonium players, man, it's like I never left. Like it just it's so natural.
It's like riding a bike.
It's like riding a bike. I pick up the trumpet and it's just like, man, I still know how to play this thing a little bit. So no, it's cool, man. Okay, so high school, you have a lot of training behind you. Did you? And we talked about this we went to Moorhead the other day to show some property.
Oh, okay.
So we drove past Moorhead State where Will started school.
I'm sorry.
I know, right? And there's
kidding.
more things there now than just the university and B-dubs, which is what was
They
there.
got rid of the CCs at that mall you can see on the highway.
We're having a conversation with Will, but he's not speaking, so he's just nodding his head. He's reminiscing over here. But yeah, so as we were driving through there and talking about honor bands and high school and all state, all district, all this kind of stuff, did they do that kind of stuff in Virginia?
They did, and I know I made all county, all district for my sophomore year on. I think I might have made an all county band as a freshman, but I honestly cannot remember.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if I didn't. But my sophomore year, well, let me back up. My freshman year, I was a freshman, obviously, and the senior trombone player played bass trombone.
Yep.
He was also in the same church choir with me.
Okay.
And he was actually the one that got me started on trombone. And I think I had signed up in middle school for some exploratory, extra class, whatever the word is slipping me right now, where you go to like 4 different classes throughout the year, and like choir. Choir wouldn't have been terrible, but he called. I remember this to this day. He called me and said, "Michael, you're going to do band and you're going to do classical studies." And classical studies was kind of the lead into the Latin class. And I said, "Okay." So when I got to middle school, I tried out. I was in the brass class, and so I tried out all the mouthpieces, and I picked trombone. But when I got to high school, that guy was a senior. He was the first chair all-state bass trombone player, and at the time, I in some ways kind of idolized this kid, and so I knew that when he graduated, that I would take over on bass. So my sophomore year, I got the top spot in the district. I qualified to audition for state. I think I was like 14 out of 18, so I didn't even come close. But that was the only year that I actually auditioned for all state.
Okay.
But I made county and district in my senior year. I was like the 5th best trombone player in the district, but the top 3 tenors and the 1 bass ahead of me auditioned, and I was kind of the first man out. Right. But as a senior, I had an extra class, so I finally did join the choir at my high school, and they took us to audition for the Virginia Honor Choir, which is basically like all state for just seniors.
Okay.
It happens at our like VMEA conference, and I made that on bass 2 because it was the easiest one to audition on.
Yeah.
But I think I was the first person in my high school that had ever made that honor choir.
Oh, wow.
So that was a cool experience. And yeah, I think that all district band that year got snowed out or something. And so I was real petty that I didn't.
With the Moorhead Honor Band, we talked about that.
Yeah, I didn't get. I got second chair, and so I was real petty back then. So I wasn't actually disappointed that it got snowed out. But yeah, we had those things, and trombone was just something I was always good at.
Yeah.
And kind of like you, I look back and I wish I had a little bit more of the work ethic behind that than just kind of the raw ability.
Right.
But everything kind of happens for a reason. And
yeah, no, absolutely. For those that don't know, euphonium players, baritone, it's euphonium, guys, but some people call them baritones, and that's fine. We'll let it slide. But and bass trombone, and a lot of those positions are really competitive because they don't accept very many.
Yeah.
Especially in the honor bands. And so when he's saying he's the first man out, you basically, especially in the top bands, or sometimes even if you have multiple ensembles at your school, they only put 1 bass trombone player in the band. So you were right there. And so I'm assuming, like you said, you had natural talent, raw ability. You had to have some work ethic, right? Like I practiced in high school. Biggest thing with me, and especially as I went back into teaching, I would get so frustrated with I'm trying to choose my words carefully to make sure I'm not being super mean, but why I was never okay with not sounding my best, right?
Yeah.
That's fair to say. So I didn't have to practice super hard in order to do that in high school. Just because of that natural ability. But, I definitely practiced. I'm not saying I never practiced, especially for stuff like All-State Band and stuff like that. Actually, was telling this story to Will as well. We had a Moorhead Honor Band. Or no, sorry, not that one. That's a bad story. I fell asleep on my horn for half an hour, and nobody woke me up. But when we went to All-State, I auditioned, and my senior year, I was expecting for myself to get first chair. Yeah. That was the expectation for me. And I did work my butt off for that on that audition piece. And I went in there, and there was a fan above my stand, and it blew my music off. And so I played basically 3/4 of it from memory. And I was so upset, dude. I was crushed. And I went to sight reading, and they're all blind, right?
Yeah.
I went into the sight reading, and Dr. Earl Lauder, after I finished my piece, he was taught at Moorhead State, an incredible euphonium player. I finished doing the sight reading, and I absolutely smoked it because I was so like in the anger zone, and he peeked his head out from behind the screen and was like, "You killed that." And that's the only reason I got in, because they accepted 2 euphonium players in the top band.
Yeah.
And I got second chair. So I was like, oh, man, I could have done it. But no, I mean, I loved, and I know you do too still, I love music. I mean, it's taught me so much. Definitely has me where I am today. Just all the things that, I've been through, and, I know for you too. So transitioning now from high school to college, you said U of L just kind of stood out to you. You're on bass trombone now. When did you start to, you were that's one of the other things I would say probably connected us is like, I was no nonsense on the marching band field, and I really didn't come from a competitive school. A lot of schools in Kentucky are competitive marching band programs, and ours wasn't. Like all 4 years I did marching band in high school, we didn't compete at all, ever. But I just took it very seriously. Like this is the chart, this is my spot, this is the count, this is how you step, this is how you do that, this is how you do this. And I could tell right away that you were the same way. So when did you do marching band in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we were competitive, but I think they have it now, but at the time Virginia didn't have like a state championship like Kentucky does. And so we were competitive. We had the local and the local contests we went to. There was one that we always went to. It's about 2.5 hours away from Richmond. Mm-hmm. It was Bluestone High School was kind of our big contest because we just traveled so far.
Yeah.
But we were competitive, but not to the level that you see in some of these that have definitely not that BOA Grand National level competitiveness, or even those that have the state championships. But we wanted to win, and we wanted to be good. And just a note on Chris's high school was not competitive. Their band director came in when he was a young band director and just scrapped it because he didn't see the value in it, which I think is awesome because Chris's band director is a top 5, if not better, high school band director in Kentucky state history.
Period. Yeah.
He is the man.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was probably the combination of I enjoyed the competition on the field stuff that we did with marching band.
It's like a sport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was also nothing better than getting up in the stands and just having a ball.
Yeah.
Playing all the stand tunes that you do to cheer on the team. I look back and I don't know when this happened, but sports has always been like my second love.
Right.
And so it was a perfect marriage between my love of sports and my love of music. And, and the pep band side of things helped kind of push the enjoyment of band as well.
Right.
It wasn't pep band. You love football season, you love basketball season, but it's great that football finally ends, and then it's great that basketball finally ends because you get to the end of each and you're ready for the next one.
Yeah. And that was Mr. R. His theory behind that was why we have 15, 20 kids out there competing, signed up for marching band, when I've got a band of 60, 70, 80 plus that can get up in the stands and have fun with the pep band side of it. We learned new shows. We didn't do the same show every single weekend. We prepared more for contests, classical contests, KMEA and those sorts of things. But that was his philosophy, and we all loved it. I couldn't have had, and like I said, I'm not trying to, I appreciated this about you and a lot of other people too, because there were some people that showed up that were even in competitive programs that just couldn't care less, right? And so, for us, it was always investing, like, if you're going to do something, let's do it well. So our marching band was good. We just didn't compete because our focus was on other things.
Yeah, I imagine your high school experience was similar to mine in the sense that a lot of bands, their entire like first quarter, from the beginning of school to roughly election day,
Right.
is 100% only marching band,
Right.
and they don't even look at the concert band stuff that you're about to do at the winter concert until marching band ends.
Right.
I imagine that was not the case with you at Oldham County.
Not one bit.
And it wasn't the case with me.
Yeah.
We, every year I auditioned into the jazz band at Freeman, and so I would tell you that 4 days a week we spent on jazz in the fall, and if we needed to touch on something marching band related, then we would. But even in just the regular brass and woodwind classes, they would spend probably a day and a half on marching band stuff, but the other days they were getting ready for, we had our concert band music. We were, my high school band director was a veteran, and so the Veterans Day assembly was really big to him, so we had our Veterans Day stuff prepared, and that's a week after marching band ends. And then the winter Christmas concert's like a month later. And so he wanted that to be as good as possible, not just, and it wasn't just marching band centric.
Right.
And so that, I will always appreciate that. And I imagine you do too, that it wasn't just, marching band was the end all be all.
Right.
We were able to be well-rounded all year long.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, there were a lot of things we did learn in marching band as, space makes style. That's something I'll never forget as a Mr. R-ism, talking about the space and the length of the notes and when you start, when you end the notes and, things like that. I still preach to this day whenever I do go out and teach.
I'm going to use that. That's amazing.
Space makes style.
Yeah.
And it's not about, talking about staccatos and marcatos and things like this and how everybody thinks it's like, oh, that's super short. And like, yes and no, right? So, yeah, there's validity to those things that I will never forget. And we learned a lot of that we always did a reading session at the end of the year for the tunes that we were going to play for the following year, which was always fun. We just turned on, blasted them over the speakers and just like ripped on them, right? And I remember one time me and Johnny B, I was still playing trumpet then, and we were playing this tune called Dirty Laundry. And there was Jimmy had just graduated, a senior, and it was just us and Chad, right, holding down the first, second, third chair. And we just killed this part. That was kind of difficult. Mm-hmm. And Mr. R looks at us and he's like, all right, Blues Brothers. So that's just stuff. I'll remember that kind of stuff for the rest of my life.
Oh, yeah.
And, Mr. R was more than just a band director to me. Really kind of, honestly, was a father figure. I mean, the way he treated us and the way he raised us, we spent so much time in the band program that, like, almost more than we ever spent at home, with all the extracurricular stuff that we did. So always grateful and always will take the opportunity, which was my first time on the podcast, to show appreciation for him. And when he retired, I totally recorded this little video and sent it to the school that they did a compilation of videos, and I cried like a big fat baby. Like I was trying not to, but it just happened. So, okay. One of the things you said too, and, your love for sports, right? And Kelsey and I will talk about that. We'll be watching the game, whatever game, and I'm like, oh, that's holding. And then the announcers will come on and be, oh, holding, and, just like stuff like that. And she'll always tell me I missed my calling with being a sports announcer. So maybe one day I'll try it. But no, I love sports too, and I think that's another reason we were able to connect so quickly. Okay, I want to kind of push through a little bit, because the rest of this stuff I think is really kind of the...
Chris, that this might end up being like an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, it could be. It could be. And, we've had long ones before. The first couple were like an hour and a half. But it's all good. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to make sure that,
I totally understand.
I hold your time valuable, right? No, anyways, I'm not even going to look at the time now. We'll just go.
Yeah, dude.
Here we go. So... you transitioning into college, into the marching band, your love for sports starts to kind of, especially being at a collegiate program, Division I. At that time, we were not good in football. We had just hired Charlie Strong when you came in, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we started to get there. And so when did you realize that your love for music and your love for sports, and now there's this collegiate band thing, when did you start to think, hey, I want to do this?
I think I decided I wanted to be a college band director right before my freshman first fall semester of my freshman year started, when I had we had this like a pep band audition where Al really just wanted to see kind of where our ability level was. It wasn't high stakes at all.
Yeah.
And I won't go into a ton of detail, but Al Greener is a character. He's one of my favorite people on this planet.
Shout out to Al.
And he's a big reason why I am where I am today.
Sure.
But there was just, you remember that year of marching band. It was definitely not like the other years that we had.
Right.
And there was just something about Al when I got there that I know that I left there saying, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And with the Louisville Pep Band, we literally played at every sport. Mm-hmm. We played at swim meets, field hockey games, lacrosse games.
Yeah, you did all of that.
We didn't just cover men's, women's basketball and volleyball. Right. And all of that was just, we played at soccer games back then because the Big East rules were more allowing than other conferences.
Okay. And that was prior to us going into the ACC.
Yeah. And that was my freshman year was when the men made the national championship game, and so they were I guess a 1 seed the whole way through, and so we played at their games all the way up to the Elite Eight, and it just poured down snow that day.
Yeah.
And so that was just neat. It got me more involved in more than just the big sports.
Right.
Aside from football and basketball, and I got to experience a lot. And, I would tell you Pep Band is the sole reason that my love of Louisville and Louisville athletics grew.
Yeah.
It's 12 years after I started college, and I still, I'm still a diehard fan for every Louisville sport.
Love it. You're very active on the Twitter, and you're always commenting and reposting Louisville sports, and so I know that to be true.
Yeah, and and as we went through, good teams make band and athletic band a whole lot more fun.
Oh, for sure. When the team's not doing so well, it can be tough. But
I came in right after the Cragthorpe era.
Right.
But my interest in Louisville was started when they were in the Orange Bowl in 2006. Mm-hmm. And then the basketball team made the Final Four in 2008 or 9. Mm-hmm. And so they made the Elite Eight in one of those years.
Yeah.
And so I was paying attention. And so, I would play as Louisville on like NCAA football.
Okay.
And that's what got my interest in them.
Sports got you interested in the U of L.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to Louisville for a visit, when I got to Louisville, it was the summer of 2009 when I came for my first visit. And the only thing I remember about the visit was sitting down with Dr. Byrne, who was the marching band director at the time. Mm-hmm. And I had just been to Tennessee and Kentucky. And what I'll always remember is at Tennessee, their band director at the time said, "Come be a part of the legend of the Southland Band." Mm. And I got in the car as we were driving up to Lexington, and I said, "Mom, I don't want to be a part of the legend. I want to be the legend."
Look at him.
So when I got to Louisville, and Dr. Burns said, "Well, we're rebuilding. We're trying to grow the band." that just
okay.
like that was golden words to me.
Yeah.
That I can be a part of a rebuild.
Yeah.
And looking back, I think our biggest band at Louisville was like 180 people, and I'll never be able to say that I had the experience of being in a 300 plus member marching band, but I do know that the band is where it is today because of me and you and the kids that were in my class that stuck through the whole time.
Yeah.
Dr. Ackland would say the same thing.
Yeah. Because we had that transition between the Red Rage marching band into like, especially as we were there transitioning into the ACC and all those different things. Sports college coaches and Coach Strong wanted to come in and excuse me, instill traditions, right? Because he had just come from the University of Florida and won a natty. So we wanted to. They wanted to create that environment of culture and tradition, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we were a part of that. I haven't even sat down to think about that, but we were a part of that whole thing, which is really cool.
And despite we went 7-6 those 2 years with Charlie Strong. I'll never forget how just like off the walls excited Brian Warfield was when we won the bowl game in Tampa.
Yeah.
And I think that win really like set a tone for the rest of my college career.
Yeah.
Because the next year, despite being 7-6, we were in line with winning the Big East until like the last 2 weeks or something.
Yeah.
But that third year for me, when we won the Big East, ended up in winning the Sugar Bowl.
I know. Yeah.
And then we came one win away from a BCS Bowl and an undefeated season my senior year.
Yeah.
All of that just propelled the school. Basketball at the time was great. Final Four year, my sophomore year, we won the championship. My junior year and 2014 might have been an Elite Eight year.
That's the year I think Bradley Beal was at UF and Florida played Louisville again for the way too manyth time. As I get stressed every time they play each other, and I was at the Sugar Bowl. Obviously, I'm originally from Gainesville, Florida, so for everybody, I've had to like fight for myself as a Florida fan. But yeah, I mean, everybody was asking me like, "Who are you gonna go for?" I'm like, "I'm a drum major at the University of Louisville. Like, who do you think I'm gonna go for?"
Yeah,
but it was good times.
And I will say, at the time, my first 2 college visits were Florida State and Florida. And when I visited those 2 schools, it was right at the height of Tebow mania.
Yes, sir.
And so I had a Florida sweatshirt, but of course I didn't really, the rivalry didn't, I didn't understand the level of the rivalry. And truth be told, man, Florida State fans hate Miami fans, and Miami way more than they hate Florida.
That's good to know.
So
I've only had one experience. I watched Florida play Florida State in the Swamp, last game of the year, 2007, when Tebow won the Heisman that year, and that I will never forget. That atmosphere is incredible.
Yeah, no, the Florida State UF game this year was huge.
I bet it was freaking awesome.
And neither team was necessarily playing for anything,
right?
But yeah, it was. I mean, it's a. It's a rivalry for sure, but because of those ACC ties and all about the U back in the 90s and stuff, Florida State and Miami is just that heated rivalry.
That makes sense.
Now, I will say the kids in the Florida State band will not drink Gatorade.
That's hilarious.
And they'll give me a hard time if I drink Gatorade.
That's awesome.
So the hatred is still there,
for sure.
But it's like a 1A for Miami and a 1B for Florida.
That makes sense. Yeah, I would say, as I become a Florida fan, or as I became a Florida fan, and even now, like, Florida, biggest rivalry, honestly, is Georgia. Like, the Florida-Georgia rivalry.
What do they call that game? The world's largest cocktail party or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It escaped me, but that is correct. And played in Jacksonville, neutral site every year.
Yeah.
And that is one game that I have not been able to make it to yet, but I'm going to do it. Hopefully this year. That's one of the things is, I want to take my kids to more sporting events and raise them up right.
Yeah.
It's super fun. Okay, so
Getting back on track.
You're at U of L, and you start having this love for directing athletic bands, not just being in them, but like you said, I want to do this for the rest of my life, right?
Yeah.
And you started, you always found ways to contribute to the band. Like you transcribed pop tunes and things for us to play as we were to start building your skills, which is something, shout out Dr. Acklin, Dr. Lynn at that time for being able to like be open to something like that, which was really cool. And then I want to know something because I feel like the answer is yes, but I don't know. I've never asked. Not who, you don't have to name names, but I'm sure you started to tell people like, hey, I'm going to start applying to colleges to be a director, not go get your master's program. So you went to UWA right after a couple years of teaching, but you only had a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
And for somebody to teach at the collegiate level with only a bachelor's degree is pretty rare. Is that accurate? Yeah. So were you ever doubted at any point in your desire to be a collegiate director, especially at such a young age with only a bachelor's degree?
Oh, 100%.
Yes, let's do it. Here we go.
I have always kind of fed off of I've always kind of had the prove the doubters, prove the haters wrong kind of mentality. And after I student taught, the next person to teach where I did, when I met her, I introduced myself and said, what's your goal? And she said high school, middle school band kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, cool. I want to do more of the athletic band side. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, well, somebody has to do it.
Ooh.
And whether she was kidding or not, I really don't know. The way that she said it did not seem like she was kidding.
Yeah.
But that's something I will always remember. And like, I have nothing to prove to that chick, but like,
sure.
But it's just a line that I have never forgotten.
Yeah. And it seems along those lines, it seems like from that vantage point, she's basically saying it's an undesirable job.
Yeah. No.
Right?
And unfortunately, that is kind of a popular opinion for a lot of people. But even when I was student teaching, we had a seminar class, and the teacher said, well, if you don't get an A in your student teaching, you're never going to get a job. And I think I got a B+ in student teaching.
Yeah.
And me and that professor didn't have an awful relationship, but it wasn't I never got the feeling that she had any faith in me to be able to go on and be successful.
Sure.
But even when I saw that job, the listed requirement was a degree in music. And hindsight's 2020, but once I got to West Alabama, it was very evident as to why a bachelor's degree in music was all that was required. But and I'll name her because it's hilarious. But I called Dr. Acklin for a letter of recommendation, and she has always been supportive of my dream to do college band. So, and I don't think she has had any doubt that I would end up doing college band. But when someone says, "Oh, I only have a bachelor's degree and I'm applying for this job," anyone with sense is going to say, "Okay, well, good luck." And she wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I told her that I got an interview, and then I got an in-person interview, and I remember I was driving back home, back from West Alabama to back to Louisville,
right?
And I think Dr. Acklin, I had called her, and she called me back when I was like driving through Nashville, and I remember telling her that I got the job, and she was just stoked.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say she doubted me, but she doubted the idea that there was a job that would take someone with a bachelor's degree.
And a lot of people will. I mean, even people who haven't been in that position like myself, that's the the stigma around those jobs is like, man, if you don't have at least a master's working on your doctorate degree,
Yeah.
even at a small school,
Yeah, at bare minimum.
Yeah, for sure. So no, I love, and I think, again, that's why I started the podcast, to uncover stuff like this. You have a big vision. I want to do this for the rest of my life. That's a big vision, right? But you had small victories, right?
Yeah.
And, when you put your faith into this vision and the dream that you have, and then you actually go out and do the freaking work, right, to accomplish what you're trying to do, you, like I said, were very involved in every single band that U of L athletic bands did. You didn't just do marching band and said, I want to do athletic bands, right? That hard work was rewarded when you submitted an application, went down to, you could have doubted yourself and been like, I just don't even feel like I'm prepared for this interview, right? Even after you got the interview. And so I think that's one thing I want to instill into people, and even myself, man, how many times I've said some big things that kind of freak me out, but I feel like, hey, maybe I'm supposed to do that. It's have a big vision, but take and celebrate the small victories. So I love that story.
But I'll also add that when I applied for West Alabama, I knew, despite that the requirement was a bachelor's, I knew that there were going to be plenty of people, or I assumed that there would be plenty of people applying that had higher degrees than me, had far more experience. Mm-hmm. But up until that point, I had continued to run the high school pep band where I had student taught. Mm-hmm. So I ended up running that for 4 seasons. But I also, kind of as extra material.
Did you get paid for that?
No.
Yeah. Boom. Love that.
On top of that, I sent in the arrangement of the Kids Aren't All Right that we did in marching band.
Yeah.
And I sent the actual score, and then I sent the links to our practice video that Ray had put up, and then the performance of it. And my boss, who was not the director of bands, but he was the kind of our supervisor, said, that's what put you over the top, was those extra things that you are comfortable with, and you showed us that you were worthy, being even at 25 with only a bachelor's degree. And
right.
Now we live in a world where that's not likely to happen anymore. Mm-hmm. But UWA was just kind of a special case. Mm-hmm. They were in their own kind of spot of building that it worked out. And so,
well, let me just speak. That was an open door for you, bro. Like, because of what you had done, the faith that you had, the work that you put in. Yeah, it's not. It wasn't a special case then. It's not, or it was a special case then. It would definitely be a rarity and a special case now. But that's a product of you and the belief that you had and the work that you put in. So don't sell yourself short on. You earned that. You earned it.
And the other nice part about that, my dad always says it's easier to get a job when you have a job.
Yeah.
I applied for that job in like January. Mm-hmm. Well, the UWA was in a hiring freeze, so I never even heard from them until June. Wow. And between January and June, my principal had come to me and said, just kidding, we have funding. So I knew this was I wanted the job, but I knew it was kind of low stakes in the sense that if I don't get this, I'm still in Louisville. I've still got a job. Mm-hmm. But everything worked out the way it did.
Yeah. No, I love it. So teaching through JCPS, there's somebody that I actually messaged them again this morning that I want to have on the show. I talked to them literally like 2.5 years ago, and he's doing great stuff in our community, and I would love to have him on the podcast. But and you were in elementary music, which is not anything like athletic bands. So that's probably one of the reasons why you stayed plugged into the pep band, was so that you could continue to still practice what you love, right?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't lose that. So kind of give us a glimpse into, what that was like for you, kind of really switching gears completely and trying to train up the next generation of musicians.
So both schools that I taught at were Title I schools.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Title I means that when you're a Title I school, it means that a certain percentage of your students are on free and reduced lunch.
Right.
I think there's a couple other like qualifiers. I don't remember those, but yeah, I think a certain it's maybe
Low income.
Yeah, low income. And both schools that I taught at had not had really formal music instruction in a while. And so from all the students, kindergarten through fifth grade, I was starting them on their instrument, or not on their instruments, but I was giving them their first taste of what music education is. My first job, I was teaching on a cart, and so I was going classroom to classroom with a cart that is very similar to the cart that they'd roll the TV in on to have a movie day when you were in elementary school. And on that cart, I had a bucket of like mismatched rhythm sticks. I had like 4 maracas. 2 of them broke during the year. And I just kind of had this very mismatched cart full of instruments that, you know, I didn't have a classroom set of anything. I think I barely had a classroom set of those rhythm sticks. And so a lot of what I did was, like a lot of teachers, you know, you bring in your own resources. And so I had, I kind of followed the model of the woman that I student taught with. I made like music bingo cards. I had on the opposite side of those, I had a 5-line staff. And so, you know, with the youngest students, kindergarten and first grade, with them, you're just playing games basically, and you're kind of tricking them into learning music.
Trying to make it fun.
Oh yeah, and in a 50-minute class, I'm probably doing, you know, you're probably doing 8 to 10 different activities just to keep them going and moving, and you don't lose that engagement. With the older students, it was more of a challenge because I had to come up with ways to teach like kindergarten and first grade concepts, but to an older group. You can't do the same things because especially in, you know, 4th and 5th grade, they immediately can call out, oh, well, that's really kiddish. And
I know this because I have a 10-year-old, and same thing.
But, you know, I made do. My first school was definitely more on the rough side. Moving classroom to classroom was not ideal.
But you kept that positive mentality.
I tried to. It was one of the big reasons that I struggled to teach the elementary school crowd was you can talk more with older kids and try to help them through life by talking to them. But, you know, these kids can't control hardly anything in their lives when they're 8. And so when you there wasn't a whole lot I could personally do. You know, if a kid, you know, the only food that they got was at school or through the Blessings in a Backpack kind of programs, and or the parents who were not around because they were just absent or you know, incarcerated, which I had students that, you know, I knew that their parents were, you know, in jail. And you know, and so it was just, those were the things that I struggled the most with. I love teaching the content, and teaching elementary, looking back now, was one of the most valuable things that I ever did, because it just, it's so different. When it sits on a resume and they see that I'm an athletic band person, but I've never formally taught middle or high school band, and they're like, oh, elementary school. But I learned way more about classroom management teaching elementary school than I think I would have teaching band at any level. You know, kids are different, and I loved learning the elementary methods when we were in college, but I never thought I'd get an elementary job. But I learned that whole experience was so valuable. And my second year in JCPS was a little bit better. I had my own classroom. I had a few more resources than I did, but of course I was able to bring, you know, those like bingo cards and stuff, you know, the resources I had created. But a little bit of the same. It was still not as much, but it was still on the lower income side, and it was just a challenge for me. And I was learning how to be a teacher, doing things that I didn't expect having to do.
Right.
When we were coming through school.
Graduating college,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but it was valuable, and at both schools I had the most supportive principals. I believe both of those gentlemen are still at their respective schools, and I remember how happy my second principal was for me when I came in and told him that I needed to resign. And everything happens for a reason, but one of our good friends from Louisville ended up taking my job, and she has been there ever since.
Yeah.
I guess this is year 6 for her, and she has just been killing it, and is super successful, and so everything worked out the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, unfolded nicely. Yeah, I had a similar. You don't realize, especially your perspective from actually teaching the younger kids, like how much of an impact you can have on young kids, right? Like at that time, Miss Tremaine, now Miss Walker, had a profound impact on me and my love for music and the things that I went through. Middle school, high school, trumpet player, euphonium player, going to college on a full scholarship. Then, kind of losing my way a little bit, but joining the Army band is something I always had a dream and a passion for, and ultimately propelled me to where I am today, starting a business through real estate and still continuing to go back. And I'll never forget her and what she did for us in the classroom and made learning fun and actually taught us too, right? It wasn't just about like, just shake this maraca for 30 minutes until class ends, right? We actually learned things, and I'll never forget, I didn't touch an Orff instrument or remember even from, elementary school to college, right? We didn't even talk about that kind of stuff, but it set the foundation for me and music and my passion for music. And music has gotten me through, as you know, a lot of stuff. And so I think at the expense of making this a 2-hour pod, we could sit here for a while.
Oh, yeah.
But, music has touched your life, has touched my life, so many of our mutual friends and connections. And I will just, I don't know how much it's worth, but advocate all day long for music in schools and for music in general. So support the arts. Like I said, I'll never take for granted the experiences I've had and the things that I've learned and matured through music.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So, awesome, man. Well, this has been so good, dude. And as you, I want to reiterate again, big vision, small victories, right? We all encounter challenging stuff, especially even on, your journey. You're married now. You're at Florida State, getting your doctorate degree, hawking J's. I don't know if you're still doing that, but
not as much.
Selling some Jordan shoes. We've talked about that a couple times. I know you had to do that for a little while and make some extra money or whatever. But as you encounter these challenging things, and again, I don't know what this is worth, but just speaking into you, man, you're supposed to do this, bro. Like, I know more so than anybody I've ever met that this is your path, and I wish you all the success in the world as you're on your journey to become a big-time collegiate band director.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man, and I definitely hope so, but I imagine this is how long we've been going.
Yes.
Can we go like 10 more minutes?
Yeah, go,
okay.
Go.
So I do want to talk a little bit more. My experience at UWA was incredibly challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I was used to, I grew up in Richmond. I moved 8 hours away to Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
I was used to being away from things.
Right.
But when I got to Louisville, within those first few days, I felt like I had friends.
Yeah.
And I was part of a community. West Alabama is in Livingston, Alabama. It's a town of about 2,000 to 2,500 people.
Yeah.
The county that it's in is one of the poorest in the nation.
Wow.
The median income of the county is somewhere between like $18,000 and $24,000.
Wow.
Now, Livingston was kind of they were what brought that number up.
Mm-hmm.
but the what I'll say is the Deep South is just a very different place than, than a lot of people consider Kentucky the South. They're very
night
different.
and day, really.
But when I got there, I had been dating my now wife for about a year, and I remember getting back after I got the job, and we just, I got in bed and we just cried, because she knew I had already accepted, and, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And we more or less lived that first year of me being in West Alabama. We got engaged during that year and married right after, but we spent that entire year apart.
Yeah. And I feel you on that. Kelsey and I talked about that with us too.
And that was tough. I was learning how to actually be a college director. When I got there were 3 students that were older than me, and not like 40 kind of older. They were, just within a year or so older than me, and that was different. And so, like, earning the respect of that crowd was a whole lot different than like earning the respect of the younger crowd. Sure. And so, after a year, the director resigned, and so I spent the next 3 years as the interim director of bands, and so that even more so, I had to learn on the fly.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
We learned in school that band directing is like only 10% of this, and for those just listening, I'm conducting.
Right.
And 90% of it is the human aspect and the administrative side of things and financials, and but I went from not in charge of anything to in charge of like $250,000 worth of money between operation stuff and scholarships, and it was a huge learning curve. And I will always be grateful to the students that I had then, who we were in that together, and especially now the guy who has taken over the program after I left has just continued on that path, and I'm seeing things happening in that band that they couldn't have dreamed of 5 years ago.
Love it.
And I'll always know that I was a part of that growth, and I'm stoked to see where they continue to grow. And but it was a tough life transition.
Oh, for sure.
Learning how to do all that, and a lot of that has a lot of my experiences at West have pushed me to want to help more in the teacher education side of things. Every kid that gets into music school is musical enough to be there, but being musical and being an effective teacher couldn't be more different. And so something that I would like to accomplish going forward is kind of speaking on that transition from student to student teacher to teacher. And we've both had very different journeys with that transition from being in Louisville to not. But I imagine a lot of it was, I remember student teaching. I had some of my first panic attacks ever, for not while I was teaching, but just worried about, well, what happens after January or December 18th when I graduate? What am I going to do? And just that, I would tell you the growth from when we graduated to when I was 26, 27 was just as beneficial, if not more, than the growth that I had while I was in college. And
oh, for sure. I mean, I can speak to that personally myself. I mean, I slept on your couch for 30 plus days, so I get it.
But
that's a whole other story. We don't have to talk about that right now.
No, we're not. But there was a bouncy castle involved, and that's all I'm going to say.
Devontae, what's up, my brother? Devontae Parker.
And John Miller.
Yeah.
But anyway, we could go, like Chris said, we can go another hour.
Yeah.
Just going
bring
down
you
memory
back.
lane.
Maybe we'll bring you back, and we'll hit on something.
I'll be back in town at some point.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But yeah, and so now getting into Florida State, doing the PhD, I still if not, more, continue to love the athletic band side of things. Florida State, like Louisville did, makes that easy. We had a great football season. Men's basketball was not so hot, but the women's team, they play today, I think, in the tournament. And I'm continue to be surrounded by kids that love being there, and they're 400 marching chiefs, and none of them have to be there.
Yeah,
and there's something so
amazing.
special with that.
Yeah.
But I talk to these kids, and a lot of them that I see day in and day out in the music building, want to be music teachers, and just trying to throw in an anecdote here and there, or a piece of advice, just to make that transition easier as they grow into full-time teachers. Because we're seeing a lot of change in our education, like dynamic in the country, and being a teacher is definitely not what you envision it being while you're in school.
Yeah, let's sink into that for a minute, because let me say something. First of all, I want to say that, not just you caring about your students, your staff, right? The people that you work with every single day, the leadership that you're under, but now you move to UWA, and like you said, you're a husband now, right? There's even after dating for a certain amount of time, any amount of time, there's different responsibilities that come with being a husband, right? And so I know how hard that hits. Trust me. And, you are learning when you're in school and you're in college, and you're kind of just goofing off. But, you're very mature for your age. Being able to put the effort and the work in. You're not necessarily concerned about being a leader, right? But if you're a teacher, you're a leader. And I've seen, if this offends you, I'm sorry, because there are people that'll listen to this and that I know and love as people. I don't know if they'll listen to this or not, but if you do, I'm going to just go ahead and apologize in advance. Please, I've had too many good teachers to see my friends who are teachers on Facebook just ripping being a teacher. And, if you want to do that off social media to me or to a friend or somebody, a confidant, somebody you trust, that's all well and good, right? Sometimes we all got to vent. But my gosh, right? You are a teacher. You should be a teacher because you love it. And yeah, you are underpaid and underappreciated. We can say that all day long. But holy cow, I've just seen so much of that lately. And it's like, as an adult, sending your kids, you have kids now, I have kids now, to send to school, it's like, do I even want them to go to school? Because the environment that I'm experiencing now as an adult is not conducive to a learning environment that I want my kids to be in, right? So I'm sorry, I got a little pointed, but it's probably the most pointed I've been on the show so far. But man, for the love of teaching, right? Go watch Mr. Holland's Opus and be a teacher and love your students and love your job, because there's always parts of a job that you don't love. And I get that too. But at the same time, it's like, you're not doing it for yourself. You're a leader and you're in a position of service over the people that you're in stewardship of, these kids, right? Like you talked about, whether they're in kindergarten or college kids that you're trying to help transition to the next phase of their life. And that's something that I know you do extremely well. Obviously, we all wish we did things better, but knowing you, just speaking into your life, I know that you take that very seriously. So, sorry. I'm off
you're
my
good.
Soapbox now.
Now, what I will add to that, and I agree, it's tough seeing people that, that we typically respect, kind of lose that composure and get on a Facebook type platform and just need that opportunity to vent. But part of that is that you got to school and you wanted to be a music educator because of the band experience that you had with
Right.
Mr. Rogers.
Right.
I did the same thing. I saw the great experience I had, and I wanted to give that to more people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not always
Sure.
sunshine and roses, and we're teaching. I feel like is one of the few fields where you're not just dealing with like the content that you're being paid for,
Right.
but there's so many outside factors that you
Oh,
have
for
to.
sure.
And everybody puts up with administration of some kind, but almost like doctors. We also have our bosses to kind of answer to, but then on this other side, we deal with thousands of people,
Yeah.
the students, their parents.
Right.
Now, I don't remember having any major issues with parents when I was teaching at the elementary level, but I had parents and guardians that would somehow get my number, and I had a very interesting 30-minute conversation with somebody's guardian about how he thought, because he was in band,
Yeah.
how he thought I was doing a terrible job, and that the student was just saying how awful things were. And legally I can only say so much because
Right.
the student's information is protected, but it's like, man, I know that your student is telling you all of this stuff, but she doesn't play.
Right.
She doesn't contribute anything. I have no idea what she has to complain about. And so they get is their student side, and typically that's the student does no wrong, and it's all the teacher's fault.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
and it's a
you can
combination.
throw that on the
but-
teachers too, right? If you're a teacher and a guardian, and when my dad was alive, the things that I had to go through, he made sure I went through them, right? He's not going to come stick up for me, and because he's not there, right? You're not there. You're not sure exactly what your kids are doing, and I apologize in advance, so you can't take offense. But I know that, and being the outside factors that there are, I know that can make, maybe you're not even venting about teaching, you're venting about just some of that other stuff.
And a lot of it is, I think a lot of that venting comes from what you're experiencing
Yeah.
is not what you spent those countless years leading up to it.
So how can you there's a transition period, right? That's essentially a preparation for the transition of what you're going to walk into, which is supposed to be like student teaching. But even still, you could go to a great program,
Right.
great situation, student teaching, and walk into something that you don't have experience with. And so I think that's one of the things that you do have experience that you have experienced well with going to elementary music, like you had talked about, not, had no envisions of yourself doing that. What can maybe at the collegiate level now, which you've been a part of and studying to get your doctorate, maybe what's something you would change?
I don't know that there's so much that I would change. I think the way that the state of Kentucky does it, where we now have this required 200 hours of observation between when you start college and before you student teach, I think that's probably the most valuable thing that any state could do. Now, 200 hours is a lot,
Yeah.
and especially for us as music teachers, we have so many, we spend so much time in class while still, we're doing 17 hours, but we spend 30 hours in class because of all the little 1 hour, things. But, if you're someone that wants to be a teacher, get out into the schools,
Yeah.
and don't just get out into the perfect schools.
Right.
Go and help out at a lower income school.
Yeah.
Go and help out at a school where the students and the demographic doesn't all look like you. Be ready for whatever, but also when you get to your student teaching, you're just implementing your cooperating teachers classroom management plan, and so you just model after that. When you have your own classroom, you got to figure out what works.
Yeah.
A lot of people will ask their professors, well, how should I do classroom management? And there is no answer. It's all just about figuring out what's going to work best.
Right.
And I'm 31, I'm 30, almost 31 years old, and I just now feel more comfortable with the classroom management side of things. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing this for, 8 years now.
Yeah.
So it takes some time to get comfortable with. It's being comfortable with yourself. It's I'm almost just now comfortable telling a kid no.
Right.
Like I cannot do this.
Yeah.
Or we aren't going to do this.
Right.
And at first you worry that, it's going to be a problem for a long time, but then the older you get, the more you realize that they're kids and it's going to kind of slide off their back more quickly than we remember.
Yeah.
So it's just it's creating your own style within the classroom and knowing that your experience is probably not going to be the exact same as someone else's experience.
Right.
And the experience that you grew up with.
No, I love that. That's a clip. We're going to clip that. Man, again, thank you so much for being here. Shout out to High Adventure Studios for hosting the podcast. They are doing more podcasts after us, so we have to go. So if you're interested in doing a podcast, this is a great place to do it. I'm glad to have connected, I think, the person that's coming in next. So shout out to me. Shoot me a message, DM, whatever you want to do. If you want to link up with High Adventure Studios, I will connect you guys. Wrapping up the episode. Again, this episode is sponsored by Rocket Title Group. Rocket Title Group is a full-service land title and escrow settlement provider here to protect your real estate investments. When you work with their knowledgeable team, you will be guided through the process in a transparent and timely way. Couldn't agree more. Again, I always appreciate and love everybody at Rocket Title Group. Really quickly, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how can they?
My Instagram is Mr. Tignor. I believe my TikTok, or not my TikTok, my Twitter is TigsTunes,
Mm-hmm.
TUNES, and you can also find me on Facebook at Michael Tignor, and I'm send me whatever.
Yeah, no, he's available. We'll put all his info that he just expressed into our bio for the episode so that you can reach out to him. And, bro, you have a gift. And just like I leave every single episode, I want to let you know that you have a gift and it's time to grow in it.